As the story is told, dark times are upon Hilltop Castle. An ancient evil has awakened in the catacombs underneath the castle.
I am awake!
The king sends all of his men to destroy the evil lurking below.
He woke up.
But the dungeon is deadly and is constantly shifting.
I'm dead.
Only a true champion will be able to save the day.
I am a champion.
Welcome everyone to a Rocket Rabbit Commentaries commentary of Devious Dungeon. This is an indie game that is taking a shitload of inspiration specifically from the rather popular indie game Rogue Legacy. Except this game is significantly better than Rogue Legacy because it's not nearly as hard and it's significantly shorter as well. It loses out on a lot of the roguelike elements that Rogue Legacy has, but in exchange the combat is much simpler and much more fun.
Hell yeah, simplistic double tap through platforms in order to descend.
Yeah, also hidden walls. Woo! Now, Devious Dungeon is not very complex. It's very much just what would effectively be, you know, like Legend of Zelda 2, you know, but significantly faster and less jank.
Indeed. Much less jank.
Whoosh.
This game is very fluid so far. Level 1.
The big thing that you need to watch out for specifically for Devious Dungeon is the fact that every room has at least one hidden area that you should be attempting to get so that you can get additional experience and gold. You don't have to worry about taking damage that much early on because the game actually has a relatively good difficulty scaling. It gets a bit obnoxious towards the end game, but yeah, the roguelike elements of this specifically are the levels and stats that you get are carried over in between runs, and the fact that you are always attempting to constantly make progress through the dungeon.
Indeed.
However, this game does have a couple of Rogue Legacy's worst aspects in it. Specifically, touch damage is the thing that you'll end up getting hurt by the most in the game, as opposed to pretty much anything else. Environmental obstacles are not really all that big of a challenge, and most enemy attacks are not all that big. But touch damage will take down your hit points relatively quickly, especially later on.
Yeah,
one of the better things about it is because we only have to worry about one class archetype. All of your run-throughs will play relatively the same. I decided to do Devious Dungeon specifically because I wanted to do a relatively short game for that month, and Devious Dungeon is actually relatively short. I think our playthrough here is let me go check real quick.
Like 10 parts.
10 parts.
Yeah.
Yeah, so once you know what you're doing, this game runs you about 3 hours.
Now, does he only have his sword? Because I've noticed that we've only been using a sword so far.
Yes, we only have sword. We only have what is effectively this sword animation. I will admit it is not as exciting as it would be to have multiple class options, but that's kind of where Rogue Legacy starts to fall in when it comes to overall class balance. Because ranged attackers in Rogue Legacy, especially ranged attackers that get to attack for free at range, are just significantly better than any of the melee classes.
Okay, so I can see that they wanted you to... The idea, because it is devious, because the dungeon cannot be trusted, which means that you have to trust your own sense of personal space.
Yeah.
Also, enemies do not attack nearly... Well, these enemies, anyway, don't
These enemies
attack...
do not attack all that fast. In fact, the majority of the goblin-style enemies have very telegraphed and very easy to dodge attack animations.
Yeah, that they give themselves away, and then...
that is due to game balance and deciding how much the game should actually scale in difficulty. We will be shortly seeing enemies that have significantly more difficult attack patterns to deal with. Specifically, the wolf type enemies are arguably the hardest type of enemy in the game, simply because they do not stop moving, and touch damage is a very terrible thing.
Yes, that being able to keep your distance will save your life.
Now, you may notice that every once in a while we'll actually have a quest complete thing. I personally recommend going into your menu to figure out what the hell your quests are and then rushing to complete them as fast as you can, because the additional cash that you get from completing quests is very much worth it, especially when you get to have the Kingdom Hearts 1 problem where your cash well, specifically cash in this case, has a tendency of disappearing before you can collect it.
So does your cash buy, like, character upgrades as opposed to, like, more gadgets for your toolbox?
Yes, specifically you can buy stat upgrades with gear once we actually take our first death and end up back at the shop.
Okay, because you have
or you can make it to the shop the shops that are actually in the dungeon.
And the 3 stats that you can improve, your choice of one of 3, Paper Mario stats that you can improve when you level up are your health, your endurance. Did I read that right?
Your health, your strength, or your dexterity. Dexterity is crit chance. Strength is raw damage, and health is health.
Right. So you get more. I got you. Well, I hope they at least thought of some, interesting payoffs for your money. Because, you're not going to be doing much else other than just making you get 1 fewer sword strike on enemies as you level up your strength.
To be honest, that is one thing that I actually wish that this game would have expanded upon specifically, is allowing us to buy different modes of gameplay. But, unfortunately, no.
My money buy me a better game.
No, your money cannot buy you a better game.
Honestly, I think I would want to concentrate on my dexterity, because if there's one thing I've learned about damage dealing in games, especially in games where, of course, those damage dealt enemies have health bars, that crit is very important.
Crit is very important,
yes.
Specifically in this game, but I'm instead opting for full strength, because if you're actually skilled at the game, you don't really need to. You shouldn't be suffering all that much touch damage, and touch damage is the only real thing that I'm worried about.
But could somebody's crit chance be so high that will actually offset the loss in strength they had been enjoying? It's up to the player to balance.
I suppose so, but even if you go if you go full crit, and you're critting every swing, then you're still not actually doing all that much more damage, simply because, well, you're not getting strength points.
And so, in other words, the amount of crit damage you deal is directly proportional to your base damage.
Yep.
Okay, so you
crit,
are supposed to be balancing the two.
Yeah, you're supposed to be balancing between the two. I do not. I go full strength because, as good as crits are, we'll be eventually getting enough gear to where we're critting pretty much once every 3 or 5 swings.
Which is pretty nice.
Yeah. Yep. Alright, what I'm trying to do here specifically is go and find the entrance into the secret room, which is up there. That's where the secret room is, but I need to figure out how to get to it.
Well, you'd think with 1 free arm I'd be able to grab onto stuff.
Unfortunately, no. This is not Bionic Commando. Alright. Come on.
Yeah,
there it is.
fall from above.
Getting the experience tome specifically is very important for me, because I'm not actually good enough at this game to not go through it without leveling. Here's Olaf's Caravan. This is where the additional shops are.
Right. Oh wait, so you can buy different weapons.
No, they say they're different weapons, and the only real thing that changes about them, to be perfectly honest, is attack speed.
Okay, but it's a different object. Okay, well that's
it is a different
cool.
sprite, okay, but it's still basically the short sword. It does better damage, but it's still basically the short sword.
We had killed Stubby Fists, the most notorious goblin of the past 25 minutes.
No, not the most notorious. The most notorious is actually the Goblin King that is at the end of the first major section.
The Goblin King. Bounty, wanted dead or alive for Baldy McGreenskin.
Quests, for the record, are actually determined by how many of a specific thing that you have to kill, as opposed to singles of said thing.
Right. That there is a ticking counter just quietly going up in the background that is eventually counting like, oh, now you got 14 of 25. Now you got 15 of 25. Borderlands. That was fun. And smack.
A smack.
Oh, 3 additional hit points when you're swinging that fast, and you were doing 18 at first. It's pretty good.
Yep.
But enemies are going to get tougher.
They are. Not so much tougher, but tougher in general. But that's one. But again, touch damage is the only thing that I'm honestly all that worried about when it comes to enemy encounters.
So that means you must have to really think about where to land when you're falling. Well, say, one would assume there's a platform below you right now if you would have fallen off, but you don't know if there are enemies directly below you or where those enemies would be standing.
Yeah, thankfully, I don't think this game actually has any bottomless pits, or at the very least, I have not actually experienced any. I'm not an expert on this game, for the record, but it is a relatively fun and simple roguelite, so I decided to play it.
Well, I hope there are no bottomless pits so far. Well, in this game, like I was just saying, I mean, they don't have to instantly kill you, but they can definitely put some cheap hazards your way by, well, just put a bunch of enemies down on the floor below you and then see where you land.
Usually the big thing that's below you that's an environmental hazard is spike pits. But
yeah.
But spike pits don't actually hurt all that much.
Ow.
At least this early on.
He says as he lands in it twice in a row.
Yeah.
Yeah, you take 1 unit of health damage, just like getting hit removes 1 unit of health. Okay, I'm sure there are enemies right now that will hit you for 2. I would think arrows would hit for 1, and then direct hits would hit for 2. You look like a 1 damage dealer, you puny goblin, you.
You'd be surprised. The Goblin Scouts are actually significantly more threatening than the Goblin Warriors.
Level up.
Thankfully, leveling up does grant you a full heal.
Yes, it does. Level 6.
There's a Cacodemon on this floor somewhere.
I'm hearing some new stuff. A lot of it is this very peaceful violin, as though we are simply fighting our way through zombies and goblins in order to meet our beautiful babe.
We are not actually attempting to rescue a princess in this game. We're here specifically to kill the dragon at the end.
But of course, we're going to save the world. Key.
There's the key that we need.
There is always a key. There is always a dungeon. And there's always a brown thing in your hand.
Adorable little worm monsters.
Oh, thanks for clearing out all the slugs for me. Here you go.
It's like a WoW quest.
There are no humans left. They've all become goblins and skeleton people. How do we keep warping to Magic Shop Man?
Magic Shop Man is just available after specific floors.
Okay, so part of the premise of this game is kind of like the Pit of 100 Trials from Paper Mario 2, that every once in a while you run to a shop floor and then you just keep going. It's level 7 because it comes after level 6. And yeah, there are more enemies, it's a little tougher, and the challenges are getting...
Hello, wolf enemies.
Yeah, that's a new one. So what level do we
wolf
end up...
enemies hurt.
So what level do we end up descending to before we got to the new world?
What do you refer as the new world? Because if you'll notice, this is a totally different tile set that we've been on. If you're referring to a change in music, sadly this game doesn't actually have all that many audio tracks. We have the generic dungeon theme. I think each of the bosses has their own track, but the bosses are like a total of 2 or 3 minutes apiece. So that's all they really have.